right. Super happy to have you guys all here today. Happy holidays, everybody. Today is, December 20th. Okay, we are getting some pretty intense wind and rain here today, so we might even get a little bit of atmosphere going for today's episode, so that'd be super exciting. My name is Nathan. I'm going to be your guys' host today. This is episode 18 of the Healthy Humans podcast, and we are going to be talking about power training today. Before we get into that episode, just a quick thank you to everyone who listens. As the show continues to grow, I do expect to get more advertising done on the show. So if you guys want to see the ad-free version of this, you guys can join us on Patreon, where $4 a month will support the podcast, get you free access to all of our episodes and any additional content that will come along with that. So all of basically my entire health and wellness library. So let's get into the show here, guys. Today we're talking about power training. So arguably this is the type of training that is going to make the most amount of impact in your day-to-day routine and the rest of your life. That's going to be really, really important. We want to make sure that we get that done. Many are familiar with power lifting. So that's usually refers to a specific set of lifts. Usually that refers to your squats, your deadlifts, and your bench press. Those have huge amounts of benefits for the entire body, but we are going to be diving a little bit deeper than just those three lifts. And we're going to be kind of talking about what is muscular power in its entirety and not just how it manifests in just those three lifts. So that's what we're going to be going over here today. Power training is the thing of the day, and we're going to just go over our agenda. So just a quick script on what you guys can expect from today's episode. We're going to go over what is power training, the benefits of power training, because you guys always like to know what that is going to do for your body, the application of power training into your actual training program. There's going to be some good tables, and I've kind of evolved that a little bit so you guys can get an even better resource from that. And then this is actually the last episode of season 2, because this is the last episode of 2022. So those actually are going to line up pretty good. So season 3 will be in 2023. We're going to start up sometime in the new year. We might have to see if that schedule changes, because as you guys know, I am a trainer, and January is the busiest time of year. So we're actually going to see what that's going to look like. So hopefully you guys will have just a little bit of patience with me in how we are recording all that. So we'll see how that goes, but we are going to close that out just a little bit. Our first talking point of the day, guys, is what is muscular power. This is going to be really, really important, but we're just going to do a quick review over on the side here, because our last 3 episodes have covered endurance, strength, and now power, kind of 3 different training modes that I want you guys getting into your routine as much as possible. So remember, power training is going to be the intersection between strength and velocity. We talked about that just very briefly last week. So just as a quick review, endurance training is that submax force applied over time. So it's the ability to kind of continually perform that work. Strength is going to be the max force applied at a specified velocity, and then power is going to be truly just work over time. And as that time shortens, we're going to see that power increase. So that's going to be kind of the really quick kind of equation for that almost as well. So just a reminder here, guys, that we're going to be diving into this a little bit. So I know my graphics over on this side is going to be just very basic, and we're going to kind of explain more of these as we go through. So let's pop on over. What is muscular power? We're going to talk a little bit how this engages with aging as well. You guys know that it's all about creating healthy humans for their entire lives, but really it's going to come down to power training can be summed up in your ability to be explosive, or possessing the ability to be explosive. And this is going to be really, really crucial. So we've already gone over endurance and strength in a lot of detail, and so we're going to be adding velocity into those exercises, and that specifically is going to transition from strength training to power training. So it's really, really simple, and so we want to get right into why this is actually really, really important for the aging population, and actually why you should be doing this now. This is a huge focus for what I do for a lot of my work. I'm just going to adjust this just a little bit here, guys. Sorry about that. There you go. But this is a huge focus of a lot of my work. Most of my clients are elderly clients, and so we want to really make sure that they are staying as functional as possible for as long as possible. There's kind of that difference between lifespan and health span. Lifespan is just like the number of years you live on this planet, but your health span is actually shorter in most instances than your lifespan, because your health span itself is the ability to maintain your health for as long as possible. And unfortunately, in a lot of individuals, that health span drops down. And when it gets to a certain point, that's when lifespan and health span actually end and meet together. So one thing I always like to say is I always like to have silly examples, and I always try to illustrate my dogs as much as possible. So I'm just going to, and I actually get this a lot from my clients as well. So this is going to be a fun one, but I can't tell you how many times I have had to take a quick course correction, especially in this new place, when one of my dogs is like running under my feet while going up and down the stairs. Our house is pretty well split 50-50 on both levels. So we're constantly going up and down the stairs, and we have 2 herding dogs. We have 2 mini Aussies, and so they like to be right next to the ankles. It's always really fun. And so they're constantly going up and down. This may be kind of a silly example, but for me, the ability to either pause my foot in midair or make a hasty course correction is a pretty simple task for me right now. And a lot of times when you need to kind of stop yourself in the middle of a movement, actually requires a lot of muscular power, because you're using that muscular power to arrest that forward momentum and like stop it and then make that course correction. And so it's kind of like a 2-part task, but we're going to go over more specific examples of that as well when we get into talking point 2, which we're going to talk about benefits, and we're actually going to talk a lot about sport and athletes as well. So this is going back to kind of just the really, really simple example of like that course correction. If you need to like step over something, a lot of us have dogs, cats, and different pets and things like that. This is not always a simple task and can be more challenging than you know. How often you do, how often you find yourself stumbling. I can't even talk today. One moment, guys. Yeah, it's just been a little bit of it's like pouring down rain right now, but the house is still pretty dry. So I'm just like constantly thirsty, and I find that I can't talk sometimes. So excuse me. A lot of the times when people enter into new environments, they find themselves stumbling just a little bit. Not with every step, but much more than usual. Sometimes this will even result in falls. Now, I do want to reference a lot of the information that I get is from other professionals and textbooks and things like that. I always like to tell people, like, I know this much information in an ocean of information, and I'm just trying to bring that to you guys in as simple form as possible. And so that's going to be, I do want to make sure that you guys know where I'm getting my information from, right? That transparency is really, really important for me and for you guys as well. But one of the podcasts that I listen to quite a bit is The Drive by Dr. Peter Attia. The most recent episode, episode 235, actually features Dr. Peter Attia and Dr. Lane Norton. He's actually a very well-accomplished trainer, powerlifter, PhD, and he's been on the show a ton of different times. Quick congratulations to Dr. Lane Norton as well on your weightlifting win. So very nice work. Way to get after it. But there was a kind of a statistic that they mentioned in this recent podcast that stuck out to me. And a lot of times they have the time and the energy and the resources to kind of like sift through the literature. And that's actually a really good resource for me, because then I can devote my energy to other resources, learning other things, and just kind of gain that resource as a benefit. But a statistic that stood out to me in that episode was that 30 to 40% of people who enter the hospital because of a fall don't survive until the next year. And I believe that was with the caveat of usually those over the age of like 60, 65. But that's a really, really bad statistic. That is, and keep in mind, you guys should listen to the episode because there are a few extra caveats on that. So I was just like kind of taking notes while I was out walking the dogs. So I probably butchered that just a little bit because statistics, they do matter, and the accuracy of the presentation matters. But that's not good. You know, we want people to be able to, we talk a lot about like bone mineral density and things like that. So when somebody falls, does the hip actually break? And power training is actually really important, because not only is it going to provide that boost in bone mineral density, but power training specifically is going to change the question just a little bit. So maybe instead of us asking, well, did the fall break anything? Instead, the question should be, well, did we prevent the fall in itself? And that's really what we want to get down to, because you guys can post questions as well. And if questions are on here, then we will answer them live, and that'd be super cool. So if you guys are just now joining us, we're talking about kind of muscular power and aging and kind of answering the questions that I have over to my left or the right side of the screen. Sorry, it's mirrored as we're going through, so that's always fun. But really just to summarize that here, guys, bone mass is crucial. But again, I always want to ask to myself, especially when I'm working with my older clients, like, what if the fall never happened in the first place? And this is really important a lot in my life. I have many older members of the family that do fall and do hurt themselves. And so it's very, very personal. I know a lot of you guys do as well. And not only do I want to help you guys protect the elders of your family and in our communities, but I want you guys to make sure that you're not getting to that point as well. Some things in life are hard to avoid, but other things we have a lot of control over. So getting into and actually doing some power training can be really, really important. And we'll get into kind of some more specifics on that as well. Oh yeah, rain's ticking up. Hopefully you guys can hear that a little bit. That'd be kind of fun. We do want to cover our talking point number 2, which is the benefits. Now, this is actually the same table that I shared with you guys last week. I just blew it up just a little bit so you guys can take a look at that. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, because we're going to post this the day after, feel free to pause this, take a look at this, see what happens as you guys age and the differences that happen when you add in resistance training. Now, power training, endurance training, sorry, let me rephrase that. Muscular endurance, muscular strength, and muscular power, those are all forms of resistance training, which is why we're using this table over here so you guys can really see what's going on. So muscular strength, power, muscular endurance, mass, muscle, fiber, size, muscular metabolic capability or capacity, resting metabolic rate, body fat, bone mineral density, and physical function. Those are all the things that we are looking at right now. And now this is not a comprehensive list of all the benefits that you will get with resistance training, but these are going to show you very, very clear ways that resistance training is going to benefit your body. A lot of times with aging, if you're not doing anything, you're going to see these results happen right in that middle column. So everything is going to decrease. We want all of these to be as high as possible. And with the caveat that body fat is going to be that one factor that with age actually goes up, right? And so with all of these other factors, they just decrease with age. It's the old phrase is, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So when we add in resistance training over here, you're going to see all of those go in the positive direction. And one misconception that I'd love to address here, guys, is that yes, the functional ceiling for people does get lower over age, but that has been dramatically exaggerated. And a lot of the times we don't expect much from those who are in kind of those higher age brackets. So 40s to 50s, 50s to 60s, 70, 80, and onwards. As a society, and I've been guilty of this before, is we expect very little from that population of people. Whereas if you start training now and you go through the rest of your life, the expectations for what you can do are actually going to be pretty high because you're going to know what your abilities are because you're using them very constantly. The research actually shows that even those people who are sedentary, so not moving around, and they're already in those age brackets and they don't have that ability, and they don't have that ability to basically go back in time and then train themselves up, they can actually still get all of these benefits, even if they're starting at whatever age they're starting at. So that's why this is so important. It's like people need to move. Like if you're doing nothing, that's really bad. But if you're doing something, it's always going to have, I shouldn't say always, 90% of the time, it's going to have a really positive effect on the body. And we're going to see really, really cool things continue to happen. So take a look at that here, guys. That's going to be really helpful for you. Let's keep on moving. Next, we're going to talk about the muscular power benefits and how they benefit everything in sport. Now, we haven't actually talked a ton about athletes in this podcast yet, and so we'll cover just a few sports because you're going to find very quickly that I'm going to start repeating myself a little bit because power training is crucial to sport and skill development. If you're not incorporating any power training into your resistance programs for athletes, they're not going to be performing as well as you need them to. So it's really, really important that we have this. Now, in athletes, the entire training span is going to get shortened, right? Because a lot of times, especially in younger athletes, they get usually, even if they're a one sport athlete, in the academic system, they usually have about 3 months to actually perform that sport, and then the other 9 months to prepare. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of time. And it's even shorter for those who are multi-sport athletes. Now, the nice thing is there's a lot of crossover between these sports because they do require a lot of the same skills. So that's why this can be really helpful. But when we're looking at just resistance training, so endurance, strength, power, there's not a lot of time on the clock, right? So we're trying to get these gains as fast as possible, and young people do it really, really well. That's one of the coolest things is people don't expect young people to be as good at moving things around as they think they are. We expect them to be really, really good athletes, but they're also good exercisers as well. So keep that in mind here, guys. So we just want to cover a couple of different sports. First one's football. This is the sport I played. I wasn't terribly good at it. That is what it is. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't like an All-American or anything like that, but I did play. I was a lineman. I played center and nose tackle. I preferred being on the defensive side of the ball rather than offense. I liked running into people, not necessarily just pass blocking. That was much more fun for me. But power is crucial. There's no spot on the field as a football player that you wouldn't benefit from muscular power training. When you are looking at plays that usually only average 7 to 9 seconds from whistle to whistle, a lot happens in that time, and it all requires muscular power. The ability to get off the ball, get off the line as quickly as possible and be explosive, that's power training. That's why we do like cleans and jumps and all these different things in the weight room so that we can see this happen. Then we move on to other sports as well. There's power applied in different zones, especially for a baseball player. For a pitcher, for example, there is so much rotational velocity that goes in at like the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, like as they're going through that range of motion. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those like pictures halfway through a pitch and you see the range of motion that a pitcher is going through, and it blows my mind to see that. And that, like, if you listen to even other podcasts as well, so Mike Reinhard, I believe it is, does a sports physical therapy podcast. I believe it's called the Sports Physical Therapy Podcast, and they cover a lot of baseball player topics on there. And they'll talk about just like these rotational velocities that are just mind-bogglingly huge. Like just, whew, didn't think people could move their joints that fast. And it's really, really cool. And we see a lot of that rotational velocity about those joints in pitchers, batters, and then that same kind of like lateral and forward backwards power comes into play as well. Every time somebody needs to field the ball, you're in a standing position, you're ready, you're in that athletic stance, and you need to get something done. The ball gets hit towards you, and you need to make that split-second decision, go one way or the other, forwards, back, and you have to make that decision right away, or you're not going to be you're not going to be able to field the ball, right? So that happens quite a bit. One sport that I think people take for granted and how hard this sport is volleyball. I love volleyball. I'll tell people all the time I love playing it. It's really fun. I haven't gotten to play in a while. I'm bad at it for sure, but I try hard. So that's always fun. But like same thing is like just how a baseball player has to react to a play. Volleyball players have to do this, but they have to do this many times. Every single time that ball is up in the air, they're doing this, and they're constantly shuffling around. They're jumping, they're diving. All these things requires so much muscular power, and it's crucial to play. If these players are moving slowly on the court, they're not going to get anything done. They're not going to be able to play that over the net. They're not going to be able to get those points. They're not going to be able to like stop those spikes. You know, you gotta have that muscular power. So volleyball's another one. Hockey. I'm over here in kind of the lower Seattle area. So go Seattle Kraken. Woo! Go Kraken! And just watching these guys, I skate myself. That is a skill I do not possess. And just watching how these athletes just change directions, accelerate, decelerate, takes so much power. It's crazy. The winter season is also a good season for basketball. So if you're a basketball fan, I mean, you see these, like in the WNBA and the NBA, you see just these crazy athletic feats, and they just do it like it's normal. And it blows my mind how much power some of these athletes have. And then soccer is, or football, as it's known throughout the rest of the world, is obviously there's some major events going on with that as well right now. Can't imagine which one. No, I'm just kidding. That's the FIFA Cup that's going on in Qatar currently. I actually don't know if it's done or not. I haven't been paying attention. I'm not a huge soccer fan myself, but I mean, you see like the explosiveness that like these players play with. Oh my gosh. And just to get the ball moving at those velocities takes an incredible amount of muscular power. And we could just go on this list forever and ever, essentially. And it would take a while. It would take a while to go through. One thing I do want to go over here, guys, is the importance of speed and power in a lot of, this will apply to all of these sports as well. Excuse me, pointing in the wrong direction. All of these sports as well. But you also need to know that this is actually a really, really good chance to kind of check in with how your form is holding up. Because when you add speed to something, if the form is not good, if you do not have a good foundation, your form is going to go away right away. You'll know when your form sucks. Either somebody will be nice enough to tell you, or you have a coach that you're working with and they're going to go through. But at the end of the day, a bad rep feels sloppy. And that's actually really, really good for training, because that's going to give you so much to work on. And it's not just, okay, I need to do this amount of weight, this many times, this many reps, this much rest, and just going through kind of the basic program, but it's going to fill in all the extra details. You're going to say, okay, reps 1 and 2 were really good, but rep 3, I kind of leaned forward a little bit too much into that one. And then rep 4 and 5, I was able to correct. So next challenge, let's go 1 through 5. Let's make them all nice and clean reps. This is really, really important, because ideally you've already gone through the process of building strength and endurance. You have that great foundation for this. So you have that form memory already built into your brain. And then you know right away, like, ooh, that rep felt sloppy. The best athletes in the gym, regardless of whether or not you're an actual, like you're a sport athlete or you're an exercising athlete, those are the ones that pay attention to those details. And that's going to be really, really important. Here's just kind of the slide that we've got for that here, guys. I was getting ahead of myself a little bit, so I do apologize for that. But speed is going to essentially highlight those form issues, and that's just what I was going over as well. All right, next thing we're going to get into here, guys, is we're going to actually go over how to apply muscular power into our training. Now, power training is going to be the most affected by aging. A lot of the times, the type 2 fibers inside of the muscle will degrade a little bit faster than your type 1 fibers. Now, type 2 fibers are like strength and power fibers. Type 1 fibers are like endurance fibers. That's like a really boiled down understanding of what those are, because we haven't yet gotten into all of the terminology and things like that yet. If you guys are interested in hearing more about that and kind of like dissecting the muscle cell, what part does what, I would love to get into that in 2023, but you guys just got to let me know. One of the biggest things when considering power training is like recovery times get longer over time as you age. It just takes you longer to bounce back. So that's a really, really important consideration in power training. So for example, if we look at our tables over here, guys, I kind of chopped these up so we could zoom them in just a little bit for you guys, so you guys aren't having to squint at the screen. And I'll try to do a good job at verbally explaining this for those who are listening on just the audio feed as well. But strength and power sets are going to be most optimal between 2 and 6 reps. Now, power, you guys are going to see this fade off just a little bit. Between 2 and 5 is a little bit more ideal, especially for power when you're adding that velocity in. And you're still going to get some gains from 6 to 10. But as we go through and we drop that to 11 to 15 and then 16 to 20, you're going to see that power really, really drop down quite a bit. You're going to get some benefits all the way up into like the 20 rep range, but not a ton, especially if you're moving weight around. That's going to be really, really tough. And just like neurologically, that's a lot of reps to go through, especially when you're being so explosive. Do like a jump squat explosively 20 times, no weight. Tell me how hard it is, and then add a little bit of weight to that exercise, just a little bit, and you're going to notice that fatigue is going to set in really, really quick. So that's why those gains will go down so much, is because you're just putting so much tension and load onto the body that you're going to be getting the most optimal results in that 2 to 5 range for muscular power. Now, this is a very, very similar range to strength, but the weight choice is also going to vary quite a bit as well. So if you are using the same weight for a power set and a strength set, and you're just moving faster, that tells me a couple of things. So it tells me your strength sets were probably too light, or your power sets are going too heavy, right? Because if you're training 1-to-1, like if it's a 200-pound back squat, right? And you're able to just like rocket up into the air with that, and you're able to add that power, and it's like no problem, then you probably aren't maximizing how much of a strength benefit you could get, right? You want to cut down that amount of load. I'll usually start by unloading my clients by about 40%, so that we can achieve that extra velocity. and hopefully produce those results. And as I mentioned earlier, making sure that that form is locked in, because we want everyone to be safe. That's always the biggest concern there. So just over to the side here, I'm actually going to get rid of my face for just a moment. All right, so up on the screen here, guys, this is a power training exercise template, essentially, whatever you want to call it. It's got 5 different moves on it. And this has got sets, reps, rest, loading, and some notes on here as well. So I actually filled this out just a little bit more for you guys. And so these are going to be some good exercises to kind of get you used to power training. And then you can kind of start applying some of these concepts to other moves. So the first one's the power clean here, guys. This is one of my favorite moves to do when power training, because it's so hard. And it's just a really, really fun exercise, and you don't need to load it very much at all to get a lot of benefit out of it. For this one, we'll do 5 sets by 5 to 6 reps. Rest time will be anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes, and the load will be 50%. Now, when you guys see this 50% here, that's in reference to your 1 rep max. We talked about last week how when we're doing 1 rep max, the best way to do that, especially when you're power training or doing heavy lifts and explosive lifts like the power clean, is actually going to be best to do a predicted 1 rep maximum. And I did put in the notes over here, if you've got a buddy that's helping you out or working out with you, get them to videotape you from the side and the front when you do your reps. Tracking that bar path and making sure it's nice and vertical is going to be really, really important. If you're swinging that bar out really, really far away from the body, then that's something you can kind of help clean up, and video is going to help show that really, really quick. The next one's going to be a cable press. Now I've got this in there instead of a bench press because this is something I really, really like working on, especially with my implement athletes. So athletes that have bats, rackets, just, anything that they have to move around, and those clients that may have to have a little bit more rotational speed, as I'll put a little bit of rotation into their exercise. This is going to be about the same percent. So 5 sets by 5 to 6 reps, 2 to 5 minutes rest. And that load time should be about 50% of their 1 rep max, and then focusing on tempo. So really exploding out really, really quick, and then control that rep on the way back. Usually when we're doing tempo, we'll do a kind of a 1 to 3 or like a 2 to 4 tempo. So 2 seconds on the way out, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 on the way back, reloading, exploding out, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Just depends. Find what ratios work best for you, and then try to challenge yourself with that. And that's going to be so I put this one in there in lieu of the bench press, because a standing exercise is actually going to help create a little bit more hip and shoulder rotation as well. So that way we can get the entire body into that. And it is hard to train it is hard to train hip rotational power when you're laying down. So that's why I switched the bench press out for the cable press. Next one's just box jumps. This is a super standard power move. It's just the ability to move your own body through space. So whenever you guys see a BW in the loading section, that just stands for body weight, because if we type that out, this whole column would be huge. One tip I will say is include a landing pad. So have your initial box that you're jumping onto right in front of you, and then to the side of that, either to the left or the right, depending on where you're setting up, have an additional platform that's like half the distance between your box and the ground. Because the hardest part, especially when I'm doing this with clients, they say, this hurts my knees. And it's actually not the jump itself that hurts the knees. It's the coming down that usually starts people. It's that impact that people want to get rid of. So I would say include that landing pad, and that's actually going to help those joints, and that's going to help them recover better too. And I don't know about you guys, but I love recovering a little bit faster. Next one is a single leg glute bridge. Single leg glute bridge, saying that twice. There we go. This is really, really fun. I will actually see people do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of a 2-legged glute bridge in the gym all the time. You see somebody who's on the ground, they've got the bar, usually with a pad braced across the hips, and then they're driving those hips up into that bridge position with their shoulders usually braced on a box, and then they slowly lower on the way down. This is actually overall, it's an easy movement because you can load a ton of weight, because your glutes and your hamstrings are so powerful. So powerful, and the range of motion is pretty reduced as well. So I'll usually tell my clients, like, hey, let's take the weight out and let's do this 1 leg at a time. This is going to be really good as a diagnostic exercise to see what leg or glute is working a little bit better than the other. but it's really, really good for developing glute and hamstring power. And then once you've isolated one leg, then start adding a little bit of weight. You're going to get way more benefit out of it, and it's going to be a little bit more worth your time. Then on the last one here, guys, we just have agility. Plain and simple. I love using like agility ladders, mostly because that's a personal preference for me. I loved using those when I was an athlete. I use those with my clients, and this was hard to write out. This was hard to write out these sets and reps for this, because I usually go through a ton of different patterns here for my clients, and it really just depends on how well your client adapts to different movement patterns, how well they learn them. The first round through is always pretty slow. And there's just, you can search so many different types of agility movement, and you're just going to find in kind of an endless list. So there's lots of patterns to do here. I will usually focus on anywhere between like 4 or 5 different patterns. And so when you see the 5 sets here, that's usually what I'm referring to. So one set is one pattern or one movement type. And then we're doing that 3 to 4 times each with 1 to 2 minutes of rest in between. And this is usually only done with body weight, mostly because you don't need that extra weight. Let's see what we got next. And let's bring my face back in as well. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you guys for that. When we're going through this here, guys, measuring power can be really important as well. It can be really important to your progress because you want to see how you improve from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. This is going to be really, really common, especially as we get into the new year. I love it when people set New Year's resolutions, but what I love even more is when people are able to stick to them. So that's why I always recommend people like get a trainer that they work with, because that's somebody who's going to like keep them on track. It's going to provide them accountability. I do that a lot. I do it in person, and I provide a lot of different training resources over on my Patreon. So just going to plug that again. Feel free to subscribe. It's like $4 a month here, guys, and you guys get all the resources that are on there. So check out the levels, and that helps out me a ton. But when we're measuring power, a lot of times it's a simple math problem. It's reps divided by time, right? If we're again loading the bar at 200 and we're doing a back squat, how fast can you do 10 reps, right? Now, key with this is like you want good spotters. You want to be able to do this safely. And if you can't do it safely, then you got to lower the weight. That's like a non-negotiable when I'm training with my clients. If we are power training, if your form sucks, I'm going to give you probably one chance to go through and fix it. But if you can't, then we're going to deload. We're going to unload that bar just a little bit or a lot, depending on how bad it is. And then we're going to practice. We're going to practice that same effort until we can get it right. And then we'll move up. Because again, speed and weight, when you add those are going to highlight any form imbalances there are. So making sure that's there. Some really common benchmark workouts I do with my clients are things that we can usually do pretty easily in the gym. A lot of the times what we're doing is we're going to do like a 100-meter row. That's a really, really short row time. I've seen people do this in like 12 seconds, and I've seen people do this in 30 seconds before. And so really focusing on setting them up for success, taking good notes. So if you're a professional, always take good notes for your clients. And then this is something that's really, really easy to apply to yourself. Most rowers, when you sit on them at the gym, will have an ability to program different workouts. And so you can just program 100 meters into there, and then it'll give you a countdown. When you start rowing, it'll start the timer. When it gets down to 0 meters, then it stops the timer for you. So there's no guessing at that point. So you can do that effectively. Really, really nice. Same thing with like a sprint. So if you're doing a sprint, you can do this in the pool. If you're doing this not on a machine, for example, so if you're running, you're biking, or you are swimming, having somebody else time you is going to be really, really important. And really this just goes on, guys. There's so many different ways you can apply this to you, and it's really, really good for aerobic power as well. So kind of that VO2 max, which we haven't talked about a ton, and I'm actually looking forward to getting into that a little bit in the future as well. All right, guys, let's get into the workout updates really quick. This is kind of our last episode of 2022, so it's actually going to go by pretty quick. Last week, we ran 7.77 miles. That was pretty fun. I was hoping to get in more than that, but we were helping some family move, and so we were only able to get a few runs in and only 3 lifts. We did our back squat, we did our chest press, our bench press, and we did some deadlifts. I was wiped out last week, guys. Like, I'll let you know, like, those lifts did not look good. I was able to maintain on my squat and my bench. My deadlift did not look good. I did have to cut that down by a few sets. I was just fatigued by the time even Wednesday rolled around. And then we had some moving and stuff to do. And so I was kind of preparing for that. So I was hoping to get a little bit more, but this next week, I'm going to be kind of getting basically as many lifts as I can in before we start the holiday season, because we've got so many different places to be, different parties, things like that. So we're just being okay with what we can get done. So that's a big piece of advice I always like to share with my clients as well, is like, be okay with what you get done in December, because traditionally, especially here in the US, people do the least amount of exercising in December and the most amount of eating. And that's why people set New Year's resolutions, because there's usually the biggest swing of inactivity to activity or vice versa. And usually we also see the biggest swing in weight as well, which usually freaks people out. Most of it's water. If you're active, it will go away after a week. You'll settle back down, but that's just how the body moves. So we do want to go over just our quick listeners as well here, guys. We didn't have any new listeners in the United States. We did have additional like percentages in different states. So all the states that we had, we actually saw increases in that. So super, super excited about that. But if we do hop over to the world map, let me get my face out of there really quick. We are going to see an additional mark right here. The newest country we were able to add to our tally was Israel. So super excited about that. But we just have a huge list of listeners throughout the entire United States and internationally. So all those states include Washington, California, Indiana, Texas, Ohio, Oklahoma, Florida, North Carolina, New Jersey, Oregon, New York, Georgia, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, Virginia, Tennessee, Colorado, Minnesota, Maryland, Missouri, and Nevada. Over time, guys, we're going to have to just, we're just going to have to like keep the marks up and just have you guys all happy about that. Because if we get all 50 states on, I know you guys aren't going to want to hear me read that every single time. So let's head into the outro here, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been a really, really fun time producing this podcast for you guys in 2022. I'm really excited to dive into more of these subjects over time. So if you guys want to hear more, let me know. You guys know how to reach me. You can find me on Twitter. You can send in live questions on here on Twitch. You can comment on YouTube. All those different things here, guys. You can find the audio version on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, all those different places. I would love to do some more AMA episodes in 2023. So we're just getting those questions rolling in and having enough where we can just be like, boom, we're answering listener questions the entire time. So make sure you guys go through that. Please, again, support me on Patreon so that way you guys get all of my current content, because we're going to continue putting that out and hopefully going to get even more content done in 2023. Just a reminder here, guys, all information discussed on this podcast does not constitute medical advice, and you should always consult your physician before starting an exercise program. Remember to move around here, guys. Movement is medicine. That's rule number 1. Make sure to drink lots of water. That's rule number 2. And most importantly, rule number 3, enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you guys in the next one. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you all in 2023.